Welcome to Charts Today, Asia Pacific. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 25th of October, comes to you from London. And we had very big falls in the US last night, and surprisingly, Asia has fared okay. I guess it's because we are seeing the US futures pushing a little bit higher, but I say okay, we're down quite significantly in Japan, but and Australia, but we're not seeing this quite the percentage falls that we saw in the US. The Nasdaq down 4.6% last night, biggest fall since 2011. So looking at the dollar index, still looking bullish on the dollar. We jumped yesterday, holding on to those gains. We've activated an upside target 2% higher. Euro is recovering a little bit this morning, but still bearish on that short-term chart. Downside target of 2% there. The Japanese yen, which is normally where we see a flight to funds when for a safe haven, the yen is actually looking stronger against the dollar this morning, and the dollar has turned bearish against the yen. So we are seeing a dollar not strong everywhere. Sterling sitting at that 129 level. Downside targets 126.60, 128. So it does look like we'll still go lower. Sterling against the euro is also bearish on the short-term chart, and against the Swiss franc also bearish, and against the Aussie dollar still in bearish mode there as well. Bitcoin jumped the day before yesterday, or jumped yesterday, but is giving up most of those gains, so we're just seesawing on Bitcoin, no real direction there. The US stock markets, of course, different indices behave differently. We saw the S&P 500 index down 3%, the Nasdaq down some 4.62%, and so we're forming this lower low, and this is really significant now. We do have a further downside target on the Nasdaq of 5% and a long-term downside target of 12%. So we haven't broken the long-term trend yet, so we're still, believe it or not, long-term bullish on the weekly chart, but on the daily and the 60-minute chart, there's no denying we are bearish. It's the shortage of clear downside targets at the moment that makes it hard to call. We're seeing on the Dow 10% downside, but no short-term downside targets. So for the moment, um, the calling the bottom is quite difficult. And the Russell 2000, of course, we've been quite bearish on, was down 3.8% yesterday, and we do have a downside target here of 15% on the long term and 16% on the medium term. So there we do have a little bit more clarity on the downside. Looking at the futures, we see the S&P future is up this morning, some 0.4%. So we might see a little bit of a relief rally on the US market at the opening today. The Nasdaq up 0.6%. But this is really a case of 4 steps down, 1 step up. So really, it's still a very bearish picture now. The futures in London this morning, we're seeing the FTSE future down 0.75%, and the DAX future down by a similar amount. So we are seeing long-term transitions to bearish in Europe. So quite significant there that we are seeing that that behaviour. And looking even at the FTSE mid caps, we see here also entering bearish territory on the long-term chart, and the DAX also, the cash DAX also doing the same. And we've got downside targets here. So it really is looking pretty bearish for Europe. The CAC 40 is actually the market that's held up the best in Europe, but it's the best of a bad bunch now, and it is also just starting to enter that bearish territory on the weekly. The Japanese 400 index down 3%. The Hang Seng down 1.75%. China relatively resilient, down only 0.5%, but still looking very bearish. And of course, activating these downside targets, some 30-40% lower, is really significant there. In India, we see the Sensex down just under 1%, and the Aussie market down 2.8%. So on the 200 index, so really looking worrying. And we do still have a further 6% fall potential there, and 12% undoing long-term trends. So really looking bearish indeed. Brent crude is sitting at $75, so that's come off quite significantly. We stabilized yesterday, but we are in bearish mode. If we go lower, we had a target to 75.42. We nearly got there. If we go lower, we've got another target to 72 on the 60-minute chart. And the uh, WTI chart, we're also seeing 1.5% lower target. So looking medium term and short term bearish as there as well. Looking at US nat gas, it's held up relatively well at $3.18. Gold is higher this today, up a further 0.25%, and we're just starting to see this long-term transition for gold. While markets transition to bearish, gold is transitioning to bullish, and we've got a new upside target here. If we move higher today to 1269, multiple upside targets gives us confidence that we are going higher for the yellow metal. Looking at silver, also pushing higher there, and US 10-year yields fell back significantly yesterday to 3.11%. So we are just seeing the movement there. And the German bond market, we're seeing German bonds actually higher today. So we're seeing bond yields falling across the globe at the moment. Looking to Asian Pacific markets, we see here, just look at all this data coming from Yahoo. The last screen was coming from Thomson Reuters Icon or Metastock. Looking at Yahoo, we're seeing here that we are just looking at a sea of red basically, and we see very much the Nikkei down 3.72%. Here we see it on the chart, breaking key levels. The Hang Seng down, as we said, 1.7%. The Sensex down 105 and the Nifty down 1.06. These charts again coming from Yahoo Finance, weekly 1% point and figure with targets, half daily, 0.5% point and figure with targets. Here I've got my unbalanced volume and my relative strength, the Dow set at 100 this year, so we can just see which stocks have been underperforming and which indices have been underperforming. We've got other markets down as well. We're seeing Taipei down 2.4%. We're seeing a Seoul down 1.9%. So we are seeing quite significant falls across the board there. Jakarta bucking the trend there, and New Zealand not down as much either, down just under 1%. But really, it's looking very bearish for the region. If we take a look at the Nasdaq stocks last night, just to put some of these falls into perspective, just looking at the giants, Google down 5%, really big falls here. We've been worried about Google being bearish below the medium-term chart for some time. Amazon was down nearly 6%. That's taking Amazon bearish now on the medium-term daily for the first time. Downside target here at 24% on Amazon. And we're seeing how these relatives are all starting to break. That's quite worrying. Looking at Apple, Apple actually holding its relative chart quite nicely here, and we've still got big upside targets. Apple actually fared okay, it was down 3.4%, so we're not seeing quite the sell-off there. Looking at Facebook, Facebook was down 5.4%, starting to look bearish on that long-term chart. We still have downside targets of some 25-27% on Facebook. We've underperformed the Dow Jones by 19% this year, so really starting to see significant moves there. Some of the other stocks that we saw falling were Microsoft down 5.3%, but it's holding its long-term trend, the medium-term trend just starting to break there. Netflix down 9%. We saw really big moves there. And Nvidia giving up its long-term run now, looking really quite bearish. Downside targets of 20 and 21% on the charts there. And taking a look at Tesla, also actually interesting, only down just under 2%. Reported quite strong results after the close last night. Profits for the quarter and is up about 10% in after hours trading. So be interesting to see Tesla today. Looking at the Aussie market, we just see the rises here. Linus Corporation up 7.2%, Cleanaway up 5%. So there are a handful of stocks that are bucking the trend there. Resolute Mining, we've seen that recently, also just the volatility showing through there is up just 3%. So not all stocks falling, and quite interestingly that we are seeing that uh, in the region. Taking a look at the bearish stocks, AMP, the life insurer announcing big announcement this morning, and we're seeing the stock down 24%. So that's really been hit really badly. Um, we do still have a target. This target was given back in March to 12.4%. So we are seeing quite big moves there as well. Taking a look at the Nifty 50 in India, Wipro actually bucking the trend up 3% and still bullish on its charts there. So we are seeing quite good potential there. Only one upside target of 10%. Really needs to break to this new all-time high, but that is very unusual at the moment, seeing stocks making new highs. India oil also up, so we are just starting to see some performance there, but realistically, it's still that relative trend is just so clearly down. That's relative to the Dow Jones. And looking at Tata here, um, we're seeing that's actually on a pretty good relative strength trend, although we're just seeing a little bit of a fall away there, and we do have one downside target. Looking at the downside on the Indian market, just ranking the other way, India Bulls has been a frequent visitor to the worst performing stocks, down again this morning, really has collapsed away. These prices coming in from Yahoo. Vedanta also now long-term bearish with downside targets here. Remember, you can do this on any stock, so you can look up any stock that you like. China, just having a quick look here, we're seeing China actually pretty evenly balanced, quite a lot of stocks to the upside, and Hong Kong, we're seeing a handful of stocks to the upside here. WH Group up 2.6%, so not everything falling. And then looking at the Nikkei, we only have two stocks up, Panasonic Corporation, and the downside, we are seeing stocks down some 9, 7, 8%. So we're seeing really big falls there in the Japanese market. That's it for today. Hopefully, we'll have a better day tomorrow to close the week. Until then, happy charting. See you then.